KGF 2 has finally arrived. And how? The phenomenal craze is ringing all the bells at the box office, with collections that might even surpass RRR. You see, with back-to-back mammoth blockbuster churning gold across the country and beyond, the comparisons are expected and the box office pundits are at it non-stop. We at Filmkopath might not be that interested in box office records, but more on the interesting contrast of cinematic choices that the two action flicks opt for, and how intelligently they work for their own universe. And thereby, we also try to get an understanding of why RRR works better for a universal appeal, while KGF takes our cinema to a unique visual style that might be the roadmap for the future. So without any further delay, let's get on to the comparative analysis of RRR and KGF, two of the all-time blockbusters of Indian cinema released within a month of each other. Putting aside the swag and charisma of rocking star Yash, the single most striking aspect of the two KGF films has to be the unique editing style. Now pay attention here. It takes time to get adjusted to the zigzag editing, the continuous sharp cuts that construct the multiple set pieces, or the interspersed frames are put together in a sequence though separated by decades in the timeline. Now, it is all by design that builds up to the basic purpose of the film. That is, a mass entertainer riding on a hero worship vehicle, laden with back-to-back claptraps and not much intricacies of plot or subplots, where the crime saga works only as a necessary premise. Yash has to lit his cigarette from the burning machine gun. That's the target. And for the frame to be captured, he needs to own a machine gun first. And then comes a reason for why he needs to own it. It is the same way we are told that Sanjay Dutt's Adhira leads a Viking lifestyle, so that his looks with all the tattoos on his head and beyond is justified. It's the looks, the swagger and the whistle moments that director Prashant Neel is mostly focused on, and the story comes as a mere derivative. Now, do not get us wrong, that's nothing demeaning. In fact, cinema is more about visuals than storytelling at its core, and we have likes of Wuxia Classic, House of Flying Daggers, or Dario Argento's giallo masterpiece Suspiria, which thrives on style over substance approach, largely celebrated within cinephiles. But how does the jump cut editing build on this swag factor that the film is looking for? Let us look at a few set pieces. Remember the intro scene of Raveena Tandon's Ramika Sen? We see her taking the oath as the Prime Minister of India, and while the voiceover of the oath runs, we cut into a sequence from a future timestamp, where PM Ramika instructs to fire the Home Minister and then the entire cabinet. The oath voiceover is also intercut with the voiceover from Prakash Raj, who is narrating the story in real time. And there's also a third sequence cut in between where Raghavan, the government official determined to take down Rocky and KGF, is seen to set the clock time as if in preparation for the upcoming face-off between Ramika and Rocky, which again links back to Ramika taking an oath. Under conventional editing style, all these sequences would have taken 3 to 4 minutes. And here we have a collage approach of around 1 minute where Ramika is introduced, her swag is flaunted, Raghavan is set up as the bridge between her face-off with Rocky, while the parent narration from Prakash Raj continues. This editing style is continued across in KGF, where almost always more than one thing is happening, with one or more than one voiceover that link the disparate visuals. Rocky's mother appears across the two films in similar frequent flashbacks for a scene or a song or just a dialogue, always reminding the audience where Rocky's origin story lies. This approach works at your overall senses and not at a visual level alone. It feels like an experience, a ride at a theme park rather than conventional cinematic appeal that lets you sync a particular scene and relish it. Remember the car chase sequence in Chapter 2. Where the screen goes black in silence for few seconds. It tries to replicate the effect you would have sitting inside the car under heavy adrenaline rush, jerking at the bumps, pausing for breath. And this immersive effect that comes through the editing is what makes KGF the experience it is, and perhaps a new direction to action cinema from here on. In contrast, as you might have noticed, the best moments of RRR are in slow motion. Your jaws drop when Bhim uncovers the truck and the animals jump out in the open. You take time to sink in what just happened, and SS Rajamouli relishes your disbelief and lets you savor the moment. Similarly, when Sita Ramaraju puts up a grenade on his arrow to fire at the British, or he comes out in the Rama attire, it's similar shots of lesser frame rates that is in use to fetch a conventional cinematic visual that takes us to the cinemas. And of course, we have the more emotional scenes shot at a slower pace, like the young Sita Ramaraju learning from his father to ignore everything else and focus at the enemy during a fight, or him being whipped that's portrayed through an entire song sequence. Now that's because it's the story, it's the mythological references, it's the emotion of independence that becomes the core of RRR. Substance embodied in style, and not a character in reel or real who supersedes the narrative. Does it not have claptraps like KGF? Of course it does, but more through expositions of the screenplay rather than swagger shown by the same characters. It is also in the color palette and set design that similar differences are noticed. You will watch a plethora of colors in RRR, like any other Rajamouli film, that represent the varied emotions, relations and connections. While in KGF, it's the dark sepia tone that flows throughout, which perhaps represents the pain of the working class of people we watch. There's a distinct glimpse of color put in contrast through Rocky's suits or Ramika's saris. In the second half of KGF 1, we find Rocky shed his suits and merge into the sepia tone, and then he is back in his blazing suits in KGF 2, having taken over from Garuda. As we say in KGF, the color is dominated by the characters, enabling their swag. Interestingly, the color palette also turns brighter when the camera enters Rocky's palace in KGF, where there's Reena, the heroine, and thereby supposed emotions. Why we say supposed, a discussion for a different day on the gender politics of KGF. On the other hand, the set design of RRR, though lavish and spectacular, isn't as intricate and detailed as KGF. KGF thrives on the ride, and obviously the tracks and pits on the road had to be well managed. Every artwork that one sees in KGF is original and is something that will not be seen in any previous films. Apart from few items like telephones, even plastic that comes up with a shiny surface is avoided in the design, and second-hand army tents are used for the KGF labor colony. The set design also ensures that the cinematography can easily achieve the dark tones that the film aspires, thus all along building up to the immersive ride the film promises. Both the approaches have separate perks for the audience. While RRR gives visual pleasure and cinematic spectacle, KGF provides an enticing experience that we generally associate with adventure rides. And here's where the question of universality comes. RRR is obviously the more regular cinematic appeal that we are habituated with, as it turns into a film that both international critics as well as the parents back home have enjoyed. It's also one that stays with you beyond the credit rolls, as those scenes that you savor in the theater gets lasting impression in your heart and mind, which you can return to after the film finishes. KGF, on the other hand, is an experience while you are on it. You definitely carry that energy and acid inside, but to pick one moment ahead of the other might not be easy. It's an overall roller coaster which doesn't allow you enough time to sit and smack each turn and juncture. And even if the few frames last longer in our mind, think through and you will find them to be the slow-mo ones, like Rocky lighting his cigarette. It's something for the pace-loving youth, swag-loving mass, and may not find much following among non-Indian cinephiles with limited access to similar swash-centric hero worship portrayals, who will also need to follow subtitles while the fast edits are on. And it will definitely not work for the audience who simply cannot adjust to the hammer jump cuts. So although surprising at the surface, it makes sense when we understand that the 20-year-old Ujjwal Kulkarni, who has edited KGF 2, was picked up by Prashant Neel, being highly impressed by his fan edit of KGF 1 upon release. Puritans will already have reservations considering something all adrenaline not to be art. But what is art if not inclusive of intrusive change? We already have Netflix producing content like Black Mirror, Bandersnatch, where audience inputs define the narrative flow, and it won't be surprising if cinema moves forward to gaming zones with similar immersive content for the audience. Maybe next it's us who would guide Rocky to his hammer. Whether KGF or the likes of it age well or not is a question that's difficult to answer today, but its impact and occupancy cannot be denied. And does the success of KGF bring down what we have been habituated to watch all this while? No way. Lyrical, subtle, restrained cinema is there to exist and is in no conflict with the other kind. So watch KGF, enjoy the pump, watch RRR, enjoy the spectacle, and also watch the indie gem that needs your support, engagement, and proactive concentration. Cinema is an umbrella of varied colors. It's up to you whether you enjoy the show or cuddle in its shelter. That is all from us today. Thank you for watching.